Good evening and welcome to Mental Health Matters After Hours with me, Dr Audrey Tang. This is the show where we take a deep dive into all things mental health and well-being, and we have lived experiences on this show. We have our best experts on this show as well, because we understand that you may need mental health support anytime, day or night. If you want specifically well-being at work issues, then we address that in our morning show on Thursdays at 8 a.m. PT on E360 TV. But today's show is very special. We have a wonderful guest. It's Fran Wilson. He is the author of From Abandonment to Acceptance, and he speaks about a whole cycle of rejection he's experienced. And he really wants people, men especially, to speak up and to be able to share what they're going through, because you're not facing these things alone. Along with that, we will have clips from our show on trauma and trauma-informed therapy from our wonderful expert, Ronia Fraser. She is an award-winning narcissistic abuse recovery coach, and she is known so well and spoken of so highly in the trauma-informed world when it comes to supporting you with treatment and therapy. So we will be hearing her insights as well. Let's head over to the main studio. Fran, welcome to Mental Health Matters After Hours. It's great to have you in the studio with us.
Yes, thanks very much for having me.
It's such a pleasure, and I really want to hear all about your book. It's called Abandonment to Acceptance, A Hero's Journey to Self-Love, which I think is so motivating.
Yes.
Do you mind just letting me... Yeah, that's lovely. It's just beautiful. And I like the imagery of the front there.
Yeah, it's really clever.
Very, very powerful. Why was it so important to share your story?
It was very important because I have grown up with many experiences of traumatic experiences, family abandonment, multiple job losses, failed relationships, and it just got to a point where I just got triggered. It was actually in my last relationship that I've got to get my story out there.
Wow.
And not just share my story, but inspire other people. You know, no matter what you're going through, there is a way out. You know, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you know, that was really just, I didn't even think about it. I just did it. I just said I have to go out and help people.
Yeah.
You know, you're not in your own. You don't have to do this on your own, and that was really just the message of the book, really.
Do you mind me asking, because we have some brilliant representatives from the Man Cave.
Yes,
John O'Poon comes onto the show, and do watch his shows. They are fabulous. He really talks about how important it is to have that space where men can just speak up without judgment, without any expectation. How does that feel when you're in that space and being able to kind of just speak? It's
incredible. I actually love it. I actually go every Monday night, Monday nights at 7 o'clock for 2 hours, and there's nothing too formal. It's just an informal chat. We get tea, coffee, biscuits, and it's just, like you say, it's a judgment-free, safe space.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what you want to share, you can share it.
You had a relatively smooth, sort of young life, but then your adoptive father left the family home as well.
Yes, exactly. When I was 13, it was what seemed to be just a perfect family. Husband and wife, 4 children from 4 different families, because 4 siblings were adopted from 4 different families.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we're such a unique family.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it was around Halloween when I was 13, that sort of time, when my dad had actually sat us down one evening and said, I've got something to tell you. Been on a business trip, met somebody else, and I want to go live with them. Gosh. So it was in literally a matter of weeks, probably months. And he went off and married somebody else after 25 years of marriage, 4 children.
Yeah, and that's got to be hard to process at that age as well.
Yes, yeah, very upset.
Of course.
But I think the older I got, I came to terms that I didn't just have one father abandon me, it was 2. Where I never really thought of that when I was a teenager.
Sure.
But now, when I'm old, I'm like, yeah, 2 fathers have walked away.
And there's got to be anger and resentment, or feelings.
Yes,
there.
yeah. Sort of mixed. I don't want to carry too much anger with me.
That's good, that's
Again,
healthy.
it's coming to acceptance, but it's just, I don't think I'll ever forget what's been done, but I can forgive and move on.
Fran's staying with us. We'll be right back.
What's up? It's Brian Randolph, host of Keeping It Real with Randy Boy. You can catch me every Saturday morning at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time on Vitality TV, right here on E360 TV. Check me out, Randy Boy.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters After Hours. We have Fran Wilson with us, talking to us about your book, Abandonment to Acceptance. And you were talking about, as you do in the book, the cycle of rejection, and you've mentioned it. How did that kind of play out as you became an adult?
I think I got clearer on, what I want in life and the way I wanted to be treated and respected. That's really the big thing for me, was just the respect and that I never really felt I had. Again, I mentioned in the book a lot about personal boundaries and setting a higher standard for myself. That was something I never really even acknowledged. I think I neglected, my worth, my value.
Sort of relating to that point, actually, I think your experiences, and you use this phrase in this book, am I so hard to love? And that's absolutely heartbreaking.
It is.
What might have helped ease those feelings? Because you were young as well, and that's a horrible thing to think when you're... I mean, it's a horrible thing to think anyway, but somehow when you're a child it feels,
It is horrible.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. Maybe it was just... It wasn't just one thing, it was accumulation of lots of things.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was the relationships and the career, the job losses.
Wow.
Like I've had job losses from, what's it, 3 from one company, let's say. And I just kept saying, like, do I not mean anything to you? Like, that was really sort of what I meant by that, is like, does anyone care about me?
We'll pop over to Ronia Fraser, who did a fabulous piece on trauma and trauma-informed work, and we'll listen to some of her top tips. Fran will be with us, and we'll be back after Ronia.
Now, what is trauma? When we think about trauma, usually the first thing comes to mind is some major life-altering event. And that is true. Of course, big life-altering events are traumatic. However, there is so much more to it, because trauma actually is any kind of adverse event, adverse experience that we don't have the emotional resources to deal with at the time. And it doesn't matter how big or how small. And you may have heard about big T and little t trauma. That's exactly what this is aiming at. If we have an accumulation of little things, little adverse experiences, the impact is not any different to a major traumatic event. Now, how does trauma get encoded? We all know people that have experienced the exact same thing and they are not reacting the same way, right? Somebody might have a trauma response while somebody else just brushes it off as if nothing has happened. So how does trauma actually get encoded? Of course, there are certain criteria that need to be met. First of all, there has to be an event, obviously. Then we have to give this event a meaning, and that's exactly where the experiences differentiate. If we give it a traumatic meaning, then of course the encoding is much more likely than if somebody doesn't give it a traumatic meaning at all. Thirdly, the landscape of the brain is incredibly important, because if we already have a vulnerable brain structure because of adverse experiences that we've had throughout our lives, maybe adverse childhood experiences, the landscape of the brain will be very, very different to somebody who hasn't, or somebody who's already done a lot of work on themselves, who has a lot of tools that helps them actually be resilient and deal with challenging situations in a much more healthy way. So we have the event, the meaning we give the event, the landscape of the brain, and lastly, the last criteria is inescapability. If we feel we are in a situation where we are stuck, where we can't get out, where maybe we don't have the support that we need to deal with this situation, whether that's actually true or just perceived, it doesn't matter. Those 4 criteria will determine whether trauma gets encoded in the body or not. What usually happens is also that the trauma then gets encoded, but it may lie dormant for a while. And then something happens that pushes that button, the trauma gets activated, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a mental health crisis. But oftentimes that connection isn't even made, right? That's why it's really, really important to find somebody who is genuinely trauma-informed, because trauma is very multi-layered and it can be rather complex. We don't only have the big T trauma and the little t trauma, we also have to distinguish between acute trauma and developmental trauma. Now, if we use, for example, narcissistic abuse as an example, if somebody comes out of a narcissistic relationship, they usually suffer from a whole range of mental health challenges as a result of what they have experienced. Now, if you then go and ask for help, which you really should do, it's okay to ask for help, you may be lucky to find somebody who can actually give you the tools that you need to stabilize your emotional well-being, to remove your triggers, to put your feet back on the ground. And that may seem sufficient, and then they send you on your way. It's very likely that you actually may come back within 6 to 12 months, because either, the client goes back to their abuser, or they just found somebody else who's a different shade of narcissist that they hadn't quite figured out yet. And the reason for that is because especially complex trauma is much more complex than a singular traumatic event. There is so much more to it, which means the first course of action will be treating the acute trauma, obviously. But then we actually need to dive deeper to actually explore what is this all about. Because unless we break that pattern, it will happen over and over and over again. So acute trauma, always first course of action. But if you are dealing with complex trauma, like for example narcissistic abuse, it is really, really important to dive deeper. Trauma impacts us on so many different levels. It impacts us emotionally, it impacts us mentally, physically, spiritually, and all of those levels need to be addressed for real trauma recovery.
How did your experiences affect you as a parent?
I think it made me realise, all my career, my jobs weren't the answer. I've still got to be a father to my 2 daughters. I kept chasing jobs all over the UK, and it was just, it made me realise that family's so important to me. And I actually got to a point where I thought I was going to lose my children. I thought they would abandon me and forget me, and because I was chasing jobs all over the country, and again I'm just sort of coming back to basics and just trying to understand that I think just family is so important, and job is not everything, even though I've got to have a job, and I'm now in a job closer to my daughters, but again I'm just again, maybe that little rejection, the fear of rejection is still lingering a little bit possibly, but I don't ever want my children to disown me, or maybe it's just. But no, I don't think they will. I'm doing what I can for them. Of course.
Do you mind me asking? This is a bit of a cheeky question, but it does help our viewers. What sort of therapy have you found helpful for you to help process?
I have had a small bit of therapy, but not a huge amount.
Right.
And that was, I think it was only about 8 sessions.
Right.
I think I just found, doing my own thing, going for walks really was the big thing. Listen to music. Mm-hmm. The therapy did help, and I probably will continue that.
Yeah.
I might come back to that, but I think just for me, going out and doing walks, socialising with friends and family it was really what I did throughout a lot of my traumatic experiences, just be around loved ones.
Because I think sometimes, and this is something Ronia says, which we'll close with later on, talking therapy isn't always the best thing for trauma.
No.
You need a more, sometimes holistic, and then she talks about havening, hypnotherapy, all of the different, more bodily based because we
Yeah.
carry trauma with us. We
Yeah.
we hold on to it.
I was actually just going to say I've just come back from a trip in Costa Rica doing a yoga retreat.
Wow.
So that definitely helped. I want to do
Yeah.
more of that.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
And I didn't realise how much I need that.
We're now going to go over to Ronia Fraser, who's going to be talking to us about alternatives to talking therapy.
Exploring why traditional therapy is not as effective as we would like. Oftentimes we don't get the results that we are looking for, and there's a very simple reason for that actually. So why does traditional therapy not get the results that we are looking for? When I talk about traditional therapy, I'm talking about counseling, I'm talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and there's nothing wrong with those intervention methods. What I'm saying is there is a place and there is a time, and trauma recovery is not it. So if you go somewhere, and it's very popular nowadays, trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a contradiction in itself. And the reason for that is that trauma recovery never happens in the cognitive function. And you can see that when people go to therapy over and over and over again for years, but they are not actually getting any better. And the reason for that is because the supposed healing is restricted to the cognitive function. Now, narcissistic abuse survivors are actually the best example for that, because I have not met a single survivor who couldn't write a PhD on this topic. All of us have this really in-depth knowledge, but despite of all this in-depth knowledge, they're not feeling any better. They're still struggling with their mental health. And that is a very clear indication that there is one more step to that, right? So obviously, learning, studying, figuring it out cognitively is a very important part of the healing journey, because we're brainy people. And if you have experienced narcissistic abuse, that experience is so out of this world. Of course, we need to get our head around it. But if we want to actually heal, we need to dig deeper, because we need to access the trauma on the same deep level that it is caused. Another reason traditional therapy doesn't give the results that we're looking for is the way the brain works. We actually cannot distinguish whether something is happening for real or whether you're imagining it. The chemical responses, the neurological reactions in the brain are exactly the same. So as somebody goes to counseling or CBT and talks about their experience over and over again, analyzes it over and over again, what happens is for the mind, for the body, it's literally as if it's happening again and again and again. So a real trauma-informed approach needs to take the healing out of the cognitive function. There will be a point where you know everything you need to know. And I'm not saying everything there is to know, because being a buzzword, whether that's narcissistic abuse or trauma, every day there is somebody who comes up with something new. It doesn't matter. There is a time you know everything you need to know. And then it's time to move into the real healing work. And remember, a trauma-informed approach is all about practical tools that help you be self-sufficient and help you work through the trauma without re-traumatizing to get you out the other side. What are modalities that are useful? Luckily, we live in the day and age where there are many options available now to explore. And I actually encourage everybody to be curious and to go out there and try out new things. Some will work, others won't work, but there is no one-size-fits-all solution, right? Modalities that have proven themselves very, very effective in trauma recovery are, for example, hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, havening techniques, and I will address all of those in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And it's really about finding your mix and match that works for you. There will be things that worked for me wonders, but do nothing for you. There will be things that you try out, not worked for me. It doesn't matter. It's about being curious. It's about trying out different things. Whatever works for you, you're going to put in your toolbox. Because at the end of the day, a trauma-informed approach is meant to help you build your toolbox that doesn't only help you deal with the situation you're in right now, but actually with life's challenges from this day forward. And it's supposed to make you self-sufficient rather than keeping you on the schedule for the therapist to pay their rent, right? That's what a trauma-informed approach is really about. Now, let's talk about hypnosis. Hypnosis has nothing to do with the hypnosis you see on TV. Real hypnosis is not about making people run around like chickens. That's show hypnosis. It's not used in trauma recovery. In trauma recovery, hypnosis is actually a very invaluable tool because it, first of all, helps us regulate the nervous system, which is incredibly important. Remember the landscape of the brain we talked about? So regulating the nervous system is incredibly important because what it allows us to do is become response able rather than being responsive and just firing off emotional triggers. It also teaches you that a state of calm and deep relaxation and peace is accessible to you. Now, if you've been highly activated for a long time, this may seem impossible. But that's where the beauty of hypnosis comes in. Because once we experience this real deep sense of calm and realize how easy it is, you can go back there anytime you need. Self-hypnosis is actually a thing as well. I do it all the time. That's the power of hypnosis, to help you regulate the nervous system. But what it also does is it allows you to access your unconscious mind. It allows you to access your inner wisdom. Because you can have the best therapist in the world. At the end of the day, they are not you. Nobody can tell you what the right thing is for you to do to come out the other side of this. Just because I've experienced narcissistic abuse doesn't mean I can tell you step by step exactly what you need to do, because your circumstances are very different to mine. Hypnosis allows you to actually access your inner wisdom. It allows you to find answers that are right for you in your particular situation. And what it also allows us to do is really access the damage on that deep level that it was caused. Taking it out of the cognitive function, stopping to figure out, trying to figure out why. Your unconscious mind already knows why. So hypnosis, incredibly powerful and beautiful. Once you really experience it, your mind and your body will be very, very welcoming to this new experience, this new state of being. So I can highly recommend it. Trauma recovery, however, is an advanced form of hypnosis, right? So if somebody has done their 3-day training to do smoking cessation and insomnia and weight loss, those are not the kind of hypnotherapists you would like to see for complex trauma, but it is available, and it's incredibly powerful and very quick as well, because you can target exactly where you need to go. Neuro-linguistic programming, very compatible with hypnosis. And while hypnosis allows us to go into this altered state of consciousness, NLP is what gives us the tools to actually make changes. And whether that is regaining our self-confidence, our self-esteem, removing triggers from the post-traumatic stress, it also allows us to update those faulty and outdated programs that I was mentioning before, which is the key to real deep trauma recovery. There are many beautiful tools, techniques that we can use in NLP in combination with hypnosis, which will make change possible in a very quick and a very effective way. And the beautiful thing with that actually is it's so scary to start out with, I'm not gonna lie. However, once you realize how much power you hold over your mind, over your body, over your life, that's where the fun actually begins. So anybody who's struggling right now, again, I would like to encourage you to really be curious and try out different things. Havening techniques is another modality that is very effective for trauma recovery. It's a psychosensory modality that's based on touch, and it's something that you can actually do for yourself. Remember, as I said, it's all about building your own toolbox to be able to just handle life in a completely different way. All of those modalities allow you to access the trauma on a deeper level outside of the cognitive function. And what you can nicely do is not only stabilize your emotional well-being by regulating your nervous system, becoming more response-able rather than reactive, which obviously opens up the doors to so many more options. As you can imagine, if you have the capacity to actually pause for even a millisecond rather than flying off the handle, you have so many more options to deal with the situation. And you can also address things that keep getting you into trouble, things that are not working for you. And that can be real deep trauma recovery. It can be things like, I don't want to eat chocolate anymore, So it's really about doing what works for you, and a real trauma-informed approach does have the tools to make that possible for you. Now, those are the main 3 modalities that I use in my practice. As I said, it's all about the mix and match. There are so many other things out there. We have, for example, EMDR or IEMT, where it's all about the eye desensitization, removing emotional charges from memories, which allows you to neutralize any experience. We have breath work, we have Reiki, we have EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping. There are so many things out there that actually are really, really suitable. But remember, a trauma-informed approach will be outside of the cognitive function. And I encourage you to just go on Google, to type in what I just shared with you, see what resonates with you, try something out. Very likely you will meet somebody on the way who has experience with something else that piques your curiosity. And that's what trauma recovery is really about. It's not about telling the story. It's not about figuring out, trying to find fairness in this or justice, because trauma is not fair and it never will be fair. It's not about analyzing it down to the tiniest little t, because you may have already done that, but you already know that you have not gotten the results that you are looking for. I know this is a lot of information to process. It might even take a day or 2 until all this information that's relevant for you actually sinks in. But I really want you to know, whatever your reason is for watching this show today, that everything is okay. Everything will be okay. There is so much help out there, even if it may not feel like that right at the moment, but that's also the purpose of this show today. And yeah, keep going, one step in front of the other, and you're not alone in this. And that's very, very important to realize.
Well, we've reached the last part of our show. I mean, a very moving and powerful show today.
Yes, we could really feel the emotion from Fran there.
Yes, absolutely. And the message that he puts across of how you just got to keep speaking up.
Yes.
And this sort of, it echoes or gives extra weight to our expert Ronia, who talks about the importance of therapists understanding all of this as well, because you can't come in at it and just go, oh, well, just talk to me about it and you'll all be better. It doesn't work that way.
No, and talking about it isn't for everyone.
No.
You know, Fran said how amazing the yoga retreat was.
Yes.
So that's a different way of processing trauma that you've had. Yes,
and other people have spoken about this before, how somehow just almost moving the stale energy in the body can make such a difference. It's Susanna.
Yes,
our
exactly.
Reiki healer.
Yes.
Fabulous. You know, it just shifts some of those feelings. I mean, oh gosh, and again, we're grateful to Fran because lived experience is so important. Why do you think lived experience encourages other people to speak up a bit more? Because I know it does me. You know, you hear someone and you go, oh, I'm not alone. I don't feel so embarrassed to share something now.
I think that's exactly why. I think it's because you think, well, there are other people around that are going through similar things or are feeling the same things as me, and and exactly that, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Because when you're struggling with something, you do potentially and probably feel completely alone, like you're a little island.
It's funny you say that because I was reading something really recently about how obviously it's the threat response. Stress kind of makes you more alert, makes you more aware, and of course because of that it focuses you in on yourself.
Yes.
So of course you're sitting there in this high level of stress thinking, I'm the only person.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's our body playing tricks on us again as well, as much as anything else.
Exactly. It does feel like that. I know that when I'm very stressed with my other work, you almost can't see or hear anything that's going on around you, and everything is right there, and your world becomes tiny. So I think that's exactly why. The lived experience just shows that there are other people, probably more than you think, that are experiencing similar things, if not the same.
Yes. So on that, if you do have a lived experience to share with us, please do write to us at studio@wellbeingmedia.org. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And from Jude and myself, good night.